I'm Jack. And it actually may have been hot enough this weekend in Spain to make Rodger Federer sweat, which has never happened before.
Never. That guy doesn't sweat.
A little tennis humor today on the Vroom podcast. We're talking about the Spanish Grand Prix. And for those of you who didn't get that joke, I feel bad for you. Rodger Federer was in the garage in qualifying this weekend, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't notice that. You see anybody else?
That's the only one that came to mind. There's always people in the Ferrari garage that I feel like are very rich and famous in Europe that I don't recognize.
Probably true on my end as well.
Rodger Federer's a pretty cool one, though. He's quite special.
And it was hot. It was really hot.
Yeah, it was really, really, really hot. It was almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah. That's hot.
Yeah. The track was really
120.
Hot. Yeah, both days, too, for qualifying and the race.
I'm excited to talk about this, though. We haven't said a word about it yet.
I know, it's great. We've saved up all of our conversation for the pod.
Yes.
Which is great. Let's talk about qualifying first.
I don't have much to say about qualifying. Do you?
Nope. Just a couple things. Yeah, not a whole lot. Rodger Federer was there. That was probably the most exciting part.
Probably true.
So coming into this race, Aston Martin unveiled some upgrades that made their car look exactly like the Red Bull.
What, is it that exact? I mean, the side pods, I think, are very similar. But aside from that, I didn't really do any digging around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If you look at the two pictures of them side by side, they look really similar.
Okay.
But I was also thinking, like, this is a ground effect car, right? And the arrow on the top of the car probably doesn't really matter as much as the floor or some other stuff that we can't really see. So it certainly looks similar, and I think the Red Bull team is like complaining about it, but who knows how similar it really is.
Did you know that previously? I didn't know that until this weekend, that like the ground effect is the big factor this year. Yeah.
That's on purpose, I believe, because they didn't want to make that's how they're reducing the dirty air effect, because it's like less of the air going over the car that makes a big difference. And they ended up doing it on purpose because it made everything porpoise. Yeah, so that's the ground effect. And like when the cars were sort of like taking off and flying, it's because the ground effect from the
if the video clip doesn't just show my facial expression right there, it was just utter disappointment in the words that came out of Jack's mouth.
It just happens to me when I have to sit there and listen to Crofty for 2 hours. These puns just start coming to me, you know?
Great. Moving on.
What were we talking about? Oh, yeah, qualifying. So the only thing I wanted to say about Q1 was that both Aston Martins did terribly and did not make it through. And so even though it looks like they sort of copied Red Bull a bit, it doesn't seem to have done much.
I want to make a complaint about that. I think I'll save it for later, though. Yeah, I'll save it for later. Keep going.
Okay. I'm curious. Q2, two small things. Lando Norris has a lap time deleted and doesn't make it through, which is kind of disappointing. And Mick Schumacher makes it into Q3 for the first time in his career. Mm-hmm. Also pretty cool.
Finally. I mean, I think he's got talent. I think he's got a decent car. But he's blowing his chances so far.
Yeah, definitely a little bit. Although I think in the beginning of the season, he struggled a lot more than he is now. I think he's sort of slowly coming into it.
Yeah, it's his sophomore year, right? Like he's still new.
Yeah.
First opportunities at actually getting points and actually making to Q3, so he's still learning.
Definitely, yeah. And I think Magnussen's a very good driver. I think sometimes he's a little underrated. So it's a hard competitor, hard teammate. Mm-hmm. And then Q3, Max's DRS wing does not open, and he mistakes that for losing power, so he aborts the lap. And then Charles had a spin his first time trying to set a lap, but his second time does a very nice 1:18.75, which is good enough for pole.
Just fast. I've got the race lap time stuck in my head, and that is a lot faster than those.
Yeah, it's
8 seconds.
Many seconds faster.
Yeah,
right?
That's crazy.
So qualifying, we have I'll just say the first few cars, because as it gets lower, it doesn't really matter as much for the race. Leclerc was on pole. Max does end up with a previous lap time before he thought that he lost power. He has good enough for second, so that's your front row. And then third is Sainz. Fourth is George Russell.
Georgie.
And fifth is Checo. Sixth is Lewis. Should we talk about the Mercedes real quick?
I think we should. I'd say that's the one real item to talk about in qualifying in general. I think they were Mercedes 1-2 in Q2 for a little while. Maybe it was Q1, maybe it was Q2, whatever it was. It was the first time we've seen Mercedes 1-2, and it was actually fairly legitimate too. They wound up getting beat at the end of it. But yeah, it was like they had the fastest laps at that point compared to what everyone was doing, which is the first.
And it seems like they've fixed the porpoising, at least in the straights. I heard Lewis said that they're still doing a little bit of bouncing in the turns, but when you ride along in the onboards, they're not porpoising nearly as much as they were.
Visibly different. Have you done the? I don't know enough about the F1 TV. I'm new to it. Do you do like the driver views? I've never done one.
No, I don't really. It's cool they have that, but I just like to watch the broadcast usually.
Agreed.
I don't know. I guess like I've thought about having two screens, but then it's like I need to use a decent amount of energy to figure out whose camera to follow along with.
Right.
I tried it once in qualifying, and it was sort of fun, but it was just too much work, I think.
Yeah, I'm probably going to stick to the race as well.
Yeah, so you got F1 TV, though? Are you on the bandwagon now?
Jack, I've told you this like 3 times.
Really? I thought you were watching on ESPN.
I had been watching on ESPN for years, and I think while I was in Europe, something made me commit to it. I think I was having trouble in Europe, and I was like, screw it, I'm just going to do ESPN or F1 TV.
Cool.
You know what it is? You can't start up a race on ESPN if it's live and go to the beginning.
Oh.
But if it's live and say you're halfway through the race on F1 TV, you can start from the beginning. So that was the deciding factor for me. And it's huge. I think it's worth the, what is it, like $8 a month or whatever?
Yeah. I've been really happy with it. I think it's super reasonable price-wise, and it's everything that I want. And you can watch that F2 documentary.
Yes. Learn about Oscar Piastri.
Yeah. So let's see, Bottas came in 7th, qualified in 7th, Magnussen in 8th, Ricciardo in 9th, Schumacher in 10th. The rest of the field, I'm not going to bother going through. I think, to be honest, that they didn't really come up much in the race. I don't think it really adds much.
I think biggest part of all of this is that it makes both of our Mercedes narratives for the moment true. Yours being that George is out driving Lewis, and mine being that Mercedes was going to find 15 to 30 horsepower in the middle of the season. Not meaning that literally, but like finding pace in the middle of the season. And both of those are coming true so far.
Yeah. I mean, it's still early in the season, too. It's good for them that they figured this out.
Yeah.
It's pretty, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised that they so definitively resolved the porpoising. I'm really curious how they did it. Because they can't actually test the cars in between the races, so they're really just guessing.
Yeah, that's
and they just like hit it exactly, it seems like.
I didn't think of that.
Well, let's move to the race. I really enjoyed this race, and I have a ton of notes, so we should just get to it.
It was very good. One of my favorites so far as well.
Yeah. And it's cool. I think it's worth noting, traditionally, this track has not led to the best races. I don't think that I think it's very, very low on the list of tracks, like number of overtakes per race. Mm-hmm. It's down like in the range, in the ballpark of Monaco. And so that makes me very optimistic about these new regulation changes when we go to like Monaco next week and some of these tracks that traditionally are more like historic, but maybe don't give the best races.
Right.
So a couple bits of context before we get to the start. Fernando Alonso in his home Grand Prix takes a new engine. So he qualified terribly in P17. And so you might as well, the way that rule works is you get, I think, 3 engines. And if you use any more, you have to take a penalty. But once you use it once, it's in your pool for the rest of the year. And he had already used his limit, but because he was in P17, the penalty isn't as severe. So he might as well take a new engine, and now he has another one in the pool for the whole rest of the year.
Right. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. And it's just like, I feel like he's been driving really well this year and has just not been finishing well. I'm not really sure what happened in qualifying, though.
Weird. He's the best driver on the grid. You'd think he'd win every race.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the car, you know? Sometimes you could be the single best driver and not quite get there.
Crazy.
Also, Lando Norris supposedly had hay fever.
Oh, is that what it was? I knew he wasn't feeling well.
That's what they said on the broadcast. I don't even know what hay fever is.
I thought it just meant you had allergies.
I don't know what that is. But that's what they said. I was watching the pre-race for a few minutes, and that's what they called it.
It'd be funny if that's what it actually is. He just had allergies. But yeah. Sorry, Lando. I don't mean to make fun of you if that's the case.
Yeah. But he still races, and I think he misses the driver's parade, but he does end up racing.
Okay.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Having watched it. Another thing I wanted to bring up, again, they were talking about this on the pre-race show, and I thought it was relevant to some conversations we've had on here previously. One of the rule changes this year was that you used to have to use the tires that you set your fastest lap on in Q2 to start the race on, and they got rid of that this year. And I was negative about that. I thought that it made it more exciting in qualifying that they had to use those tires, and it added this whole level of strategy. But they were talking about the tires at the beginning of this race, and I started to see the other side of it because they had a choice of tires. And in this race in particular, I don't think that choice was necessarily super cut and dry. So you could use those soft tires at the very beginning, but it was looking like this might be a 3-stop race. Mm-hmm. And so you could also put the mediums on, or maybe even hards, and try to do this different strategy. And normally we wouldn't have any of those types of conversations about the front of the pack because the top 10 would be locked in. And so I think it's interesting. It adds another level of strategy that they all have to decide on. It's like adding another decision to the strategy teams, the strategy parts of the teams, which can be exciting.
For sure. I always saw that, but whatever, Jack.
Okay, fair.
Glad you came around.
But all that being said, only one driver starts on the mediums and everyone else starts on the softs. So I guess it was pretty cut and dry.
Hamilton, I think it was. Is that in the notes?
It was. It was Lewis Hamilton. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. It seems like this week he's starting to come to terms with the fact that George is beating him in every race.
Yeah. Then I think that's kind of indicative by the fact that they started on different tires. It means they had very different strategies.
Yep. And Lewis being behind George, that's like he's just trying to have some way that he can try to get by him.
Yeah. My brother sent me a text too, which was really revealed that he doesn't listen to the pod. But he was like, so what's the deal? Is Lewis just not good? I didn't say anything, but Greg, we talk about it every week. We don't know, man.
And honestly, I really, halfway through this race, I was thinking this is the moment that George starts to really take over this team. But then some other stuff happens that we'll get to, and I don't know.
It was so good.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So, but let's not get ahead of ourselves.
It's so hard. I want to get ahead of myself, Jack. I'm sorry. Keep going.
It was a great race. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So at the start, Lewis, as we mentioned, on the medium tires, and Kevin Magnussen come together right at the beginning. Little bit of an interesting incident. The stewards end up calling it a racing incident. Mm-hmm. What did you have any thoughts from looking at the replays?
I thought it was a little aggressive by Lewis. Maybe not entirely fair. And yeah, definitely on his part. I don't think K-Mag was out of his, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he was in the wrong. But yeah, I don't know what the penalty, what penalty I would have given if I was a race director. Maybe a couple seconds, like a 3-second penalty, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's penalty worthy. It did seem like Lewis could have moved over a little bit more, though.
The announcers also said it. He may have had some understeer at that case, at that point. Especially like the race just started. The tires aren't super hot. You're going around a corner, and that's where they made contact. So it's tough.
Yeah, the cars are also a lot heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would have also said racing incident, I believe. Mm-hmm. Also, Sainz, to continue his run of bad luck / poor performance, he hits anti-stall at the start, so has a terrible start, and Checo ends up, I believe, getting around him, but Checo sort of had to drive in the middle of the rows of cars, which I thought was potentially really risky.
That's just Checo being Checo. I think he does that like once a race.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, it works out perfectly fine. So,
and Carlos is actually the reason. I mean, maybe not entirely, but he's a big reason that Lewis and K-Mag came together, because Carlos basically starts and is immediately moving backwards because he has the anti-star. He doesn't have the pace, and he's kind of squeezing the rest of the pack behind him. So that's kind of what leads to Lewis and K-Mag coming together.
Interesting, yeah. So that's the interesting stuff. So Lewis ends up having to pit, and he seemed to potentially have picked up some damage, but he definitely picked up a puncture. Mm-hmm. So he falls way back.
Yeah.
Magnussen goes off the track, but is able to keep moving, so he does not beach the car, and he also comes into the pits and continues his race.
At this point, I didn't know if it was just Lewis's car or just Lewis's ego, but I think everybody knew there was damage.
What do you mean?
Like the way he was driving, something was wrong. There was damage.
Oh, like what? Like on the way to the pits?
Like after he got out of the pits and he gets on the radio.
Yeah, so
Guys, I don't know if I have it.
Yeah, he asks the team to retire the car, basically.
Yeah, right. That's what he says, like, let's save the engine, save engine power, maybe call it, something like that.
Yeah, which that blew my mind, because traditionally Lewis has always been, like, I can't think of a better analogy than like cockroaches, where you just can never get rid of them.
Yeah.
And that's always how he's been. Like, he'll start in last place, and you'll think he has no business ever getting anywhere near the lead, like in Brazil last year. And then he just will never give up, and he always finds a way to recover and salvage it. And so I was shocked that he just wanted to give up.
I guess he thinks he can't win. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Maybe he wins.
Yeah. And then one thing to note, just that nothing happened. I think everyone was sort of watching Max and Leclerc, because Max traditionally gets very good starts and tends to make stuff happen off the start. But in this case, he does not, and they stay 1-2. Leclerc stays ahead.
I initially thought Max had a better start, but Charles's start was also incredible.
Yeah, and he did a great job of cutting Max off quickly.
Yeah, and it was clean. It wasn't dirty. He left room technically, but he got in his way.
Because the Red Bulls are fast in a straight line, so he sort of had to get in front of him, because if he gave Max that whole runway, Who knows? Max might have been. He had the inside. He might have been right alongside him.
Yep.
So lap 7, some more bad luck, worse luck for Sainz when he just sort of completely loses the car at the time. What looks like inexplicably, like there's no one around him, and he goes into a turn and just spins the car right into the gravel. He's able to keep it moving and get it out, but obviously loses a lot of positions and looks pretty silly, to be honest. He just lost it.
That silly goose. What a silly goose. What's he doing out there? He should be racing his car.
Yeah. It's just continuing to, whether it's luck or stuff that he's doing, but just continuing to make mistakes and lose the car, put it off the track, to just hurt himself.
In my opinion, it's really hearkening back to the days when they couldn't find a number 2 for Max at Red Bull. Just seems like some kind of competitive issue. Like he can't get his head on straight. Yeah,
it's true. It's like
talented.
It's like an Albon or a Gasly.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Or him. Didn't he do it too? Wasn't he at Red Bull?
He was at AlphaTauri. Did he ever go to Red Bull? He might have been at Red Bull.
I really can't remember.
I think he was just at AlphaTauri, and then he moved to Renault, I think, and then McLaren is what I think.
We'll brush up on our history for next time.
We need a producer to look up these things for us in a moment. But speaking of Max, Sainz looks a little bit less silly when 2 laps later, Max does basically the exact same thing, except maybe a little less severe. But he also loses the car and goes off the track.
Silly goose. They were seeing who could be sillier.
Yeah, I think Sainz looked a little sillier. He was a little bit off more. But.
Yeah, the way these race weekends work, right, is that there's a lot of racing all happening on the same track. I wouldn't doubt that there was some kind of like debris from a prior race. There was like an F2 race there this morning. Maybe there was some liquid on the track from that. Maybe it was just wind, or maybe it was a combination of the two. But the way they both went off, it didn't look like driver error.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to like, I don't know, belittle Sainz, but I feel like if just Sainz did it, I might have been more inclined to say like, oh, he just lost it. But when Max did it,
we've never seen Max just go off for no reason, no explicable reason.
Yeah, Max doesn't do that normally. No. And they do come on the radio and they say to Max that he hit like a really big gust of wind or something. Mm-hmm. So maybe that was it. Sometimes the wind, I think, can be a little crazy.
That Catalunya wind, famous.
Yeah. And it must be really hard to keep track of because the wind will go in a constant direction, but then you're constantly turning on the track. Mm-hmm. And so it's coming at you from different angles. And if it's gusting, and sometimes the wind swirls, and then it's like, all bets are off. I could see that being annoying.
Terrible. Yeah.
But they should be more or less the 20 best drivers in the world, so they can handle it. This puts Max behind Checo.
Yeah, which is 5th?
I would do... So it would be Leclerc, Checo, and George Russell, and so then Max, I think. So 4th. And Checo is right on George Russell for a while and is unable to get by, and he actually lets Max through here on lap 11 so that Max can get a chance at Russell.
Yeah, he definitely had more pace at that point, and Checo had tried to make a move on George a couple times and just wasn't even really getting close. So I get the decision.
Yes. As we'll see, not the only decision like this of the race. Mm-hmm. Also worth noting, because this is a theme that may or may not reoccur a little bit later, George comes on the radio asking about some messages he's seeing that his car is overheating already on lap 12. And he's surprised because there's no one in front of him. But they tell him those warnings are real. And so nothing seems to happen in the moment, but there is this lingering potential of engine overheating. I guess it's engine. I guess it could also be brakes, maybe.
Yeah, it could be anything, right? But
Yeah.
definitely wasn't Rodger Federer.
Yeah. If we know one thing, we know that he's not sweating. In other reliability news, Max gets really close to George at this point because the Red Bull is a faster car.
Yeah.
And we see that Max's DRS wing is having issues still. And he had issues with this in qualifying as well. Mm-hmm. And he gets really upset about this.
He was freaking out. He was not okay.
He was driving very angry. I was a little bit worried that he was on tilt and he was going to make some kind of an error.
At one point he's like, I keep pressing it. I'm pressing it 50 times. It's not working.
I was curious. Do you think they can see the wing from their mirror?
No, so the announcers were saying that they can't. They said that we have a rear view perspective that shows their wing, and that the drivers should wish they had that rear view perspective that we have because of a camera, because they cannot see their rear wing at all.
That makes sense.
Who actually drives? Is it Brundle that has driven? I think it was Brundle.
He's an ex-racer, but he's a little older. I don't think he's raced for a number of years.
He said he has driven these cars, maybe not racing, but maybe on like a test day or whatever. And he said it's very clear. You can feel it feels like with it off, it feels you're kind of getting pulled backwards down a straight, but with it open, it just feels like you're driving more fluidly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, if you press the button twice and it's working as expected, will you close the wing? Because I'm pretty sure when you press the brake, it closes automatically. Yeah, but can you also close it with the button? Because in the video game, you can close it with the button.
I think you can. I can't imagine there's a scenario where you'd want to just close it with the button as opposed to braking. But maybe there is, and if I were an engineer, I'd leave that door open. I'd leave it available to the driver.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm getting at is if he's just mashing the button, how does he know it's not working? Because wouldn't he just be opening and closing it over and over again?
Yeah.
It's interesting. But we do see when it doesn't work, it seems like it flips open and then just flips shut immediately.
Yeah.
So maybe he is just, it's working fine and he's just doing it himself.
He's crazy.
Yeah, who knows? But interestingly, it's not totally broken. And it's like this little game. Every time he would go down that pit straight, we would all look, and like sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't.
Yeah. What lap are we on right now? Where are we?
This is about the 13th lap when we start to notice his DRS is not opening.
The first like 20 or 30 laps of this race really felt like a lifetime.
Yeah, it's a 66 lap race. Yeah. A lot happens. Yeah, so I think that's probably your subtle way of saying we should move forwards, which I agree with.
I guess so. Or we could record a 3-hour podcast, which is fine.
Maybe I'll just speed it up a little bit in post.
Yeah.
Sound like we drink a lot of coffee. So, very hot, as we've mentioned numerous times. And so this is going to make the tires degrade much more quickly. And possibly this race is going to end up having 3 pit stops. They all started on the soft tires, which will degrade the quickest. And so therefore, some people start pitting already. And this is lap 14 of 66. And we see George Russell, who is in P2 at the time, and Max Verstappen come in then. Mm-hmm. Also worth noting, Leclerc is way out in front at this point. Due to the nature of George Russell being in second and Max having his little incident, there's now this huge gap that Leclerc can just continue to grow because he's faster than George.
Which is interesting. I am remembering a part of the race where Carlos was behind George. Does that make sense?
Yes. At the end.
No, I'm thinking the beginning. Oh, no, I'm thinking of when Checo was behind George at the beginning, and Checo could not get past George.
Yes. This was when they switched, I think.
Yeah. Like, the Mercedes had pace. It wasn't just George's, defending skills, the Mercedes had legit pace.
Yes, and so we're getting to so let's talk about that, because not only does that happen to Checo, but it happens to Max lap after lap.
Yeah.
George is able to keep him behind even after they pit. And I agree that the Mercedes was looking pretty fast, but I also think a lot of that was incredible driving from George. We got to see a lot of onboards of Max, and I just think he was putting the car in the perfect spot, in the right parts of the track that he knew he needed to.
Yep.
And he was right on the borderline of potentially doing something illegal with like making double moves, but he wasn't. Like they kept saying that he had this strategy on the broadcast, and I was really impressed. I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. One now wonders what would have happened if that was Lewis.
One does. Maybe two do.
Anyway, that continues for quite a while. And it's really exciting. I don't really know what else to say about it, but I was loving watching it. I thought it was great.
Incredibly worth watching. I would say that.
At one point, Max takes a ton of curb. Did you catch that in one of those turns? And he almost loses it. He's like skidding all over the place.
He was getting squirrely behind George. There were a couple points where he didn't have the grip in the back end, and I thought he was just going to lose it.
Yeah. And I think he was probably a little upset that he was there in the first place, too.
Yeah. But that Mercedes looked grippy.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because, as they've said a lot in the broadcast, now that they solved porpoising, they can actually start to improve on the actual concept of the car and make it faster and faster.
Yeah.
And it's going to be really interesting to see as we progress, because that might be a third team that's right in there for the championship hunt.
Yeah.
Which would be wild.
Tell us what happens to the Tifosi.
So Leclerc pits on lap 21. He goes very long on that first stint because he has this luxury, because he has this huge gap. And he's looking great now. He's still in the lead by 6 or 7 seconds. He looks like he was
lightning fast.
Yeah.
It was like a 2-second pit stop.
They didn't even need to, too. They could take their time. But yeah. So he has it totally under control. I also have a note. I thought this was interesting. When they were trying to figure out Verstappen's DRS, they told him to push the button after his curbing. And I didn't quite get that in the moment.
I think curbing is when you're harvesting your battery, or is harvesting when you're like generating the battery, building it up. I think that's what curbing is.
Oh, I was thinking it was driving on the curb.
I don't think so.
Then I don't really understand that at all. I don't know why that would have anything to do with the DRS. I'll have to look this up.
Could be some kind of technical malfunction. Maybe they thought they were interfering with each other. That's all I can think of.
Huh.
Or I could be totally wrong.
Well, if you know, please send us an email at thevroomepod@gmail.com. And we may or may not feature your email on the show. Anyway. So George is still able to hold off Max. And at this point, we have some more interesting teammate drama. Checo comes in for new tires and then catches back up to Max, who is stuck behind George Russell. And then Checo asks the team to let them swap so Checo can pass George Russell. It ends up that in a lap or two, Verstappen pits anyway, so I don't think it makes a huge difference. They don't let them swap. But we're going to come back to this, so I want to mention it now for some context later. On lap 27, everything changes. When Charles Leclerc loses power, and he has to actually come in and retire. So he was in complete control of the race, and now has a DNF.
That sucks for him.
It does, but it makes the race a lot more exciting.
The race so much better.
Because now this battle between Max and George is all of a sudden for the lead.
Yeah, it's going to decide the win. It's so sick.
And so, yeah, George has never won a race, and he finds himself in the lead of the Grand Prix. He has been in the lead before, but... so, yeah, right after then is when Max Verstappen pits, which makes a lot of sense. It now frees up Checo to try to get by George Russell on fresher tires. And like we've said, it's probably going to be a 3-stop race anyway, so pitting on lap 29 sort of makes sense.
I think it was around this time when Mercedes gets on the radio and tells George that Checo is going to do a one-stopper or something like that.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
a one-stopper. And
Yeah.
George goes, blimey. I found that so funny. It's like, he's such a boring human being. That's his response. Blimey.
It turns out that Checo did not do a one-stop.
Absolutely
for what
not.
it's worth. That was wrong.
Yeah.
But what he does do, Checo, is eventually he is able to get around George Russell, which does lend some credence. Is that the expression? It gives some more validity to his request to get by Max, to get by George. He's able to do it when Max was not able to. And Max comes out on new tires and is going very fast, as you would expect.
And I think George immediately pits, doesn't he? After he gets passed by Checo.
Potentially, yeah. I think I probably missed a pit stop of George's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Because there were so many.
Not huge, but yeah, I think he pits there.
Also, the one time we will mention him today, Guanyu retires.
Which I would about him later.
Oh, yeah?
No.
Okay, just kidding.
No.
Though I wouldn't even have mentioned this, but it's just mildly interesting because it's also a Ferrari power unit, and he has power unit failure.
Another interesting thing that the announcers were talking about is that there are different Ferrari power units. And that it's common knowledge that Valtteri is on a quote-unquote better power unit, better Ferrari power unit than Zhou Guanyu is.
Oh, interesting.
It's so weird to me.
So I wonder if they're allowed to upgrade the engines when they bring a new one in.
Uh-huh.
And I wonder if that was because he was just on a newer engine of his pool.
That's possible.
That's interesting. That is a thing, though. Like, Alonso was talking about it in one of the interviews, I think, yesterday, where his car is a little bit different from Ocon's. Like, when they bring in these upgrades, they don't always give them to both cars at once. So they can be racing a bit different cars.
Yeah, they don't have the resources to do them both at the same time.
Yeah, especially now with the cost cap, too. You might want to try it out, and then, you might actually walk that upgrade back. It's an interesting strategy. I do think, like, the cost cap and stuff makes the strategy more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So Max is now flying along, and he has a really, really nice move. I think it was turn 12. He makes this really cool move on Bottas around the outside that shocks the announcers. They say they've never seen that before in that turn.
I think it was around turn 10 or something. It was maybe turn 12. But yeah, it was wide. He was very wide and very clearly faster than Valtteri was.
Yeah, it was cool. But worth noting that Valtteri was in P3 at that time.
Yeah.
Very good race.
Yeah, cruising. He has a little bit of a shtick at the end.
Yes. So Max now does catch up to George Russell, and then this is when George pits immediately, and they don't actually race at all. Mm-hmm. At this point, then, Checo pits too. So now we have Max in the lead with Checo in P2 around lap 40. So that's our little sit rep. Mm-hmm. George is in P3. Now, interestingly, we haven't mentioned Lewis Hamilton at all. And one might think that's because he has become irrelevant in this race, given that he had a puncture, so took a very slow lap of the track, and then potentially picked up some damage. Mm-hmm. But we start to see Lewis has worked his way up to P6 at this point.
Which is sick, because he was 30 seconds behind 17th I think.
Wow.
And there have been no safety cars to bring the pack back together. But I had also noticed that he was in like 12th or 13th, and he had the fastest lap of the race.
Wow.
It was just sick. And yeah, all of a sudden he's in, what was it, 6th that you said?
Yeah, at this point, on lap 41, he was in 6th place on older tires, but still running really quick.
Just cooking.
And he wanted to quit.
The announcer said he wanted to call it and go take a shower. I don't know, some expression I've never heard before.
Probably some British thing.
It's a British thing. Take a shower and go home.
So now the race is getting pretty interesting again. The Red Bulls seem to be comfortably out in front, but at the front, but not the very front, there's some interesting stuff going on. P3, P4, P5, P6. Starts to get very interesting. On lap 44, Max comes in for some mediums and is able to beat out George Russell out of the pits. So he stays in second, and Checo is in first. And then on lap 48, as I alluded to, Red Bull comes over the horn, and they tell Checo that he needs to let Max through.
Yeah.
And Checo is not happy about that.
Yeah.
But I also think Max was flying. He was catching Checo so fast.
But imagine being told twice in the same race to move aside.
Yeah.
That's fishy. But in reality, it's not.
I mean, they're not breaking any rules or anything, but
yeah.
And also just for the lead, it's so much worse. Like if he thinks he can win the race. But nonetheless, he does let Max by, and Lewis also pits. This is lap 49, and so he's able to pit and come out in P7. So now he's really locked in a pretty decent finish if he can keep it on the track. Pretty crazy to even be in P7 after his start.
And his pace is just so clearly insane. Like,
yeah,
he was moving up on Carlos.
So he comes out of the pits and he immediately passes Ocon for 6th place.
Ocon, who was driving quite well, too. He had moved up a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. The Alpines were really slow in qualifying.
And then they performed quite well in the race.
Yeah. I think I heard that they sort of made the choice to tune their cars more for race performance than qualifying.
Interesting.
But so now we're getting towards the end of the race, and Lewis actually maybe has a chance at Sainz for P5. And actually maybe even has a chance at Bottas, who is currently in P4. The other Mercedes, George Russell, then takes this opportunity in the 52nd lap for his third pit stop of the race and comes out right behind Bottas, whose seat he took this year.
Yeah. That's like the very right move. It was the obvious move. Like, give him new tires with 14 laps left. He's going to go right back around Valtteri, and he's going to basically lock in third if he has a fresh pair of soft tires.
Which is exactly what happens.
Yeah. It's just rare that you actually see a sequence of events like that. It's like, okay, this is what's going to happen, and then boom, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, pretty solid. It seems like pretty solid, safe Mercedes strategy. But well executed. And so, George does get by him for third.
Who then starts moving backwards. Valtteri, that is.
So Valtteri did a two-stop, I believe.
Yeah.
And at this point, his tires are not happy.
And I was so excited because I was looking at these times and I see Valtteri falling behind George, Valtteri getting a lot closer to Carlos, and Lewis getting a lot closer to Carlos.
Yeah, they're all converging.
It was like some kind of slinky. It was so exciting.
Yeah, it's really cool. This race was very cool because there were these different segments that were both really entertaining and interesting with different groups almost. So yeah, this is almost not as interesting anymore, but Checo comes in for softs, stays in P2, and that protects them against George Russell's recent pit stop. They also want Checo to get the fastest lap, which he does. And honestly, that's pretty much it for the Red Bulls. I think we can wrap up their narrative and just say that Max comes in first and Checo comes in second.
Yeah, they're once they dealt with George, which was basically strategy. I think strategy is what really got them around George at the end of the day, and timing of that. Once they got around him, they were pretty much locked in for 1-2.
Yeah, agreed. It is easy to make strategy when your car is faster.
Yeah,
but they did.
Absolutely.
So now, like you mentioned, let's get back to our Slinky.
Our Slinky.
We have Sainz, Hamilton, and Bottas. And they all come together on lap 58 when, in the same moment, both Sainz and Lewis Hamilton pass Bottas.
We really see that happen way more frequently than I would expect. The double pass scenario.
Do you think we've seen that more frequently this year than in previous years?
Maybe. I really wish I had better examples or whatever to talk about it. But it seems like we've seen a lot of it this year. More so than in the past.
I feel like I could make an argument that makes sense because they're able to follow closer.
Yeah.
But it was exciting. However often we see it, it was cool to see this time.
And Valtteri is just, his tires are coming undone. I feel bad for him. I think with a better strategy, he could have done better today.
Yeah, but he still, I think he still did pretty decent, and he raced a good race. He did come over the radio, and he said that wasn't a good strategy, though.
Yeah.
So now, on lap 60, Lewis actually does get by Sainz. So he actually drove his way all the way up to 4th place after that.
And he was in 19th, right?
Yeah, and he started in 6th. He qualified in 6th. So with that whole crash, he actually worked his way all the way back up to be better than his qualifying position.
He's nuts.
And I still can't believe that he wanted to quit.
We saw him do this last year, but we knew at the point in time when he was doing this, he had the fastest car on the grid. He was probably faster than Max. I think it was Brazil when he started in the back, and then he finished in second, I think. With
the new engine. I think he won that race, didn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right. Either way, he did this without the fastest car on the grid.
Yeah.
He maybe had the, I don't know, 4th or 5th, somewhere in there. And he passed everybody.
Yeah.
He made up a whole minute and a half or something.
It's really, really, really impressive.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like I mentioned in the beginning, there was a point in this race where George was P3 and Lewis was nowhere.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, this is the moment right here where George firmly grabs that number 1 driver qualification.
This is where Lewis's retirement starts.
Yeah. Because that was about to be a huge point swing between the two of them.
Yeah.
So really impressive. And then on lap 65... which is 1 lap before the end of the race. Unfortunately, Mercedes comes over the radio and tells both drivers that they have a DNF risk and they need to lift and coast as much as possible. Which I was a little confused by. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts. It really surprises me that the announcers seemed to think it was overheating and they kept mentioning brakes. And it really surprises me that both of those cars just so happened to overheat at the exact moment.
I get Lewis's overheating at that moment because he was being very racy. He was in warmer air than George. George had a lot more clean open air, which helps your car cool, obviously. And they did mention that there was a water pump issue with Lewis's car.
But they also told that to George, right?
I don't know. I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, I guess whatever, because George had a pretty big gap. It didn't really matter if he was lifting and coasting, so
George
maybe
was fine.
Maybe you're right. Maybe what happened was they had that water leak, and they looked at the data, and they were like, "Oh, this is because Lewis let his car get too hot. We can't risk this for George, so he's also got to lift and coast because it doesn't matter."
Yeah, that would make sense, especially like the Toto's math. I think that's good Toto math.
Yeah, it's very safe. It's very Mercedes. It's very logical, rational.
Yeah. George wasn't going to lose third at this point unless he stopped.
Yeah. This is unfortunately enough for Lewis to lose P4, though, as Sainz gets by him.
Yeah.
But then that's your race. We said Max and Checo 1-2, and George gets another podium, P3.
It was so good. It was really so good. Best race in a while, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. And it's interesting, this narrative. Everyone keeps saying, like, Lewis keeps getting unlucky. And in this race, he sort of did get unlucky, although maybe he could have done something to avoid that. But they honestly both drove really well. I thought George drove incredibly well, too. But Absolutely. Lewis drove very well. Like, I'm not leaving this race thinking that Lewis just lost it again for himself. But George finished in front of him.
The Carlos passing him part, I don't like. I think that was fine, right? Like, Lewis was kind of lucky to even be back up there.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know.
But he deserved it. I mean, he was lucky.
He deserved it, yeah. But it was his fault that he was all the way in the back, you know? Like, he touched with K-Mag. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was still sick. It was just so sick.
Yeah, it was great. So that's the race. Some thoughts. I heard on the broadcast that Checo is in contract talks right now, and that is interesting given what happened. How he let Max by twice, and he comes over the radio at the end and he said that he wants to talk to the team later. That he's not happy with having to let Max by twice, but he did it. And that seems to be what they want him to do. They want him to be that second driver. Yeah. So that's a pretty good bargaining chip, figuring out those contracts, you know?
If I were him, and just keep doing what he's doing. I'd extend that contract as long as I can and keep getting second.
Yeah.
Because he's not better than Max. I love Checo to death. He's not better than Max. In a series of 25 races, Max is going to come out on top every time, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. But, like, Lewis needed a bow toss.
Yeah.
And they've been trying to find that for Max, and it seems like they have found that in Checo. Checo's been a very good teammate. So as long as they can keep him happy, as well as keeping him in second, they're really onto something with that pairing, I think.
Yeah.
I also think it's, like, I think about Gasly, who overperforms in that AlphaTauri and is not going to get that Red Bull seat again because they need someone like Checo to be a sidekick to Max. They don't want someone like Gasly to try to go in there and beat him.
I think it was just last week, Gasly literally went on the record in an interview and was like, I'm just as good as those other young top dogs. But I don't think he's ever going to get the fastest car on the grid, and he's going to win. And maybe he's right. I don't know. But either way, I don't think we'll ever see him win.
Yeah. I can see why he thinks that.
He's talented, for sure.
He's super talented. He's just in a really tough spot. Yeah, I don't really know what he does from there. He's not going to win. He's not going to win a championship in AlphaTauri. He might win the odd race, like he won that one race. But it's probably not where he wants to be. I don't know where he goes.
Yeah, where would he fit? And especially when you throw in just how contracts work, when they're up, or whatever. I think he's trapped. I think he has a chance, and it's over.
Maybe he goes to McLaren and he takes Daniel Ricciardo's seat.
Yeah. Maybe he replaces Carlos Sainz.
That one would be out of left field.
I don't think they would do that. They wouldn't do that to Charles.
Yeah. I think Sainz is a really good driver, even despite all the stuff that's happened to him.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it takes so long to sort of spin up in a car. I think even shaky Sainz right now is better for Ferrari than just throwing someone brand new.
Yes. I agree with that. He still had a pretty... Actually, what are your thoughts on Carlos's day?
I think it was fine. He ended up in, what, fourth?
I think...
Yeah, he ended
fifth?
up in fourth.
It was fourth?
Because he passed back Lewis.
Yeah, and Lewis gets
end.
fifth. Yeah.
I mean, he spun off the track. I think beyond that, fine.
Yeah.
We didn't see him do anything heroic, but he didn't make any other mistakes.
He really didn't seem to have the pace, though, that Leclerc had. Like, Leclerc very clearly looked like the fastest car on the grid. Granted, George was holding up the rest of the grid, so we didn't get to see anybody race Charles.
Yeah.
But before Max spun, he was still getting gapped by Charles a bit. So I think it's weird that Carlos doesn't have the pace. He didn't have the pace to move up to a podium position. When maybe if Charles were in the same position, lost a couple places, maybe he would have been able to work back to a podium position.
Yeah. And I mean, the other example is like Max did the same thing and he won the race.
Yes, he won. Yeah.
He didn't go off as much, so not a perfect comparison, but like that's sort of the difference, I feel like. Lewis also had a terrible thing that happened to him, but Lewis is a world champion and he worked his way up. And he actually probably should have beat Sainz if not for that overheating.
Yeah. And the Mercedes is definitely faster now, but I wouldn't say it's faster than a Ferrari.
Yeah. And actually, on that note, I did want to mention, I think after the race, I saw this tweet from Andrew Benson basically saying that even though this seems like Mercedes is like right back in it, they were actually closer to the pace in Bahrain than in this race.
Winning pace.
I think so. The words in his tweet are, but they were actually closer to the pace. So
even though they were positionally better today and point scoring better, they had technically better pace in relation to the winner in Bahrain.
Yeah, I think so. And he has some graphs if you want to, really dive into it. It's Andrew Benson F1 is his Twitter handle.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. But it does seem like they were porpoising a lot in Bahrain, and that was like a very obvious problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they fell back so much, because they had to address that. And so now that they have addressed that, I still feel like they're in a good way. They're on track to be in a good spot.
Mm-hmm. What else we got, man?
I love the cool down room.
I haven't watched it.
I love it. It's like my favorite part of the post-race.
I haven't seen a minute of the cool down room, but a lot of people have told me about it, and it's bad because I'm the podcast host. I should be the one watching this, but I just haven't. I don't know why.
So I think like every cool down room so far, somebody has cursed at least once. And this cool down room, they kept cutting the audio out, and Crofty was like, "Oh, we keep losing connection." And I was wondering if you thought that was because they were cursing in there, but I guess you didn't see it, so
I can absolutely tell you that's why. I don't have to watch it to know.
They let you curse on F1 TV because you can watch the onboards and just hear them saying whatever over the radio. I think that they should just have a feed of the cool down room uncensored for us F1 TV subscribers.
I want the reverse censor. I just want the curses.
Maybe that can be like another menu option.
Yeah.
For F1 TV.
It's just like asterisks, like expletives. I'd click that button all day.
Other than that, let's just go through those results. And I also want to go through the championship standings because this has some interesting implications. So Max came in first, Checo came in second, and also did get the fastest lap. So that's a maximum points weekend for the Red Bull team.
Maximum.
Which is huge after the reliability issues. George Russell gets a podium, third place. Carlos Sainz ends up in fourth, which all things considered isn't terrible, but not where he wants to be, I'm sure.
Especially at his home race.
Yeah. His dad gave out the pole trophy to Charles Leclerc.
Oh.
I mean, they had to know that was going to happen when his dad agreed to it, but...
Yeah, but oh...
For those who don't know, Carlos Sainz Sr. is an incredibly successful rally car driver and a world champion in that. So that's why he's a very famous Spanish driver, and that's why he gave out the trophy, for anyone wondering. It's not just because he's randomly Carlos Sainz's father.
They don't just give dads the opportunity to hand out trophies in Formula One. He's special.
So Lewis Hamilton did come in fifth, as we talked about. Bottas in sixth with his two-stop strategy. Really, I mean, like, disappointing given where he was a few laps before the end of the race, but that's a very solid finish.
Yeah, still a strong result for him. Absolutely.
Yeah. He's driving circles around Zhou Guanyu.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also his rookie season,
Yeah.
Zhou, so, cut him some slack a bit. Ocon in seventh, which is pretty solid. Considering that he qualified in 12th.
Yeah, sounds right.
Lando Norris in P8. We didn't really talk about him much. He sort of was kind of all alone, but given that he apparently had hay fever, not too bad.
Yeah, he got like 0 screen time today.
Yeah, and it's the only McLarens that I feel like I saw was just Daniel Ricciardo getting passed by anyone.
In the back.
He was getting passed by everyone. It seemed like he was getting passed constantly.
Yeah, maybe he had an issue, or he's just Daniel Ricciardo. I don't know. I'm not the biggest Daniel Ricciardo fan as far as his driving goes.
Yeah, it's been long enough now that I'm starting to think he might not figure out this car. I guess the car's a little different, but
not like entirely, at least, right? Like, we always see those weird races where Danny is just a madman and he drives lights out, but on the whole, he drives really poorly.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because he just seems like such a nice guy. He's got such a knowable personality, notable personality. Yeah. They got to get someone else in that seat, though. Put Oscar Piastri in there. I don't know. Yeah. I just want to see. There's so many young drivers that need a seat.
Yeah. For your next topic, I heard them mention Nick de Vries.
Yes, I love talking about Nick de Vries. He tested a Williams this week in free practice. And I don't know if you knew this. I didn't know this until this week. In order to race an F1 car, one of the qualifications, in addition to the super license points, is that you have to have tested an F1 car on one of the young driver days. And they also have requirements that the teams have to let like 1 or 2 drivers per year do one of these tests. So the fact that they let him do this test is a very interesting signal potentially. Yeah. And the announcer actually mentioned that there's a chance that he could replace Latifi at Williams even sometime this year. Mm-hmm. That'd be cool. I think he deserves it. He won F2.
And then we see Nicholas Latifi have maybe his best performance ever. In a terrible Williams weekend.
Yes, very terrible.
And by that I mean he didn't crash and he beat his teammate.
Yes. For 16th place.
For 16th place. What a weekend for him.
It's true, though. Like, he got out-qualified, but he was in front of Albon all race, presumably on merit. We didn't really see it, but
really rough race for Albon too. Apparently, he's been driving quite well this season, and then we see this, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, he was in last place of anyone who finished the race.
Mm-hmm.
Fernando Alonso also came in 9th, so he actually had to get some points after starting in last with the new engine. Yuki Tsunoda with some points in 10th place. Unfortunately, Mick Schumacher was unable to finish in the points. There were some laps where he was right around there.
Yeah. Do you know if he 2-stopped or 3-stopped?
I'm not sure.
Not sure either. Just curious if strategy came into him not getting points today. I don't know. Sorry, keep going.
I got a sense that he was on some old tires toward the end. It seemed like he was getting kind of slurped up.
Got that impression as well.
You might be right. I wouldn't be surprised if he did a 2-stop. Sebastian Vettel came in 11th. Pretty poor qualifying for him, so not too bad to be all the way up there. This is where Daniel Ricciardo slots himself in 12th. Pierre Gasly, 13th. We never really saw him all race, but that's not great from him. He got beat by his teammate pretty handily and just not relevant.
Which we don't really see. We never really see Yuki beat him.
Yeah. I wonder, we might start seeing it more. It's interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Mick Schumacher came in 14th, Lance Stroll in 15th, and then Latifi in 16th, making a little Canadian cluster with Lance Stroll and Latifi.
Of mediocrity.
Down in 15th and 16th. Speaking of Canada, I saw Lawrence Stroll on the broadcast in the pre-race show for the first time all year.
Huh.
I mentioned that we had a listener write in wondering where Lawrence was, so I thought I would mention that we saw him.
Still around, still lurking in the shadows.
Yeah.
Should I do my complaint now?
Yeah, you want to let me finish the lineup and then, or is it relevant to what I just said?
Nah, keep going.
Okay. I'm very curious. Real quick, Kevin Magnussen ends in 17th. He had the crash. Albon in 18th, and then Zhou Guanyu and Leclerc did not finish. What's your complaint?
My complaint is that the announcers came on and were talking about the Aston Martin upgrades in the middle of the race. And they were like, Aston Martin has really made great strides this weekend with the performance of their cars. While they were in 14th and 15th with two drivers who had already DNF'd. I was like, what kind of propaganda bullshit is this? No, they haven't. No, they haven't. Okay, great. They copied a Red Bull. That doesn't make them good.
Yeah, they were not good, as a matter of fact.
Just garbage, in my opinion.
They've gotten some points in other races, so they have done better with the non-Red Bull car.
That's my complaint.
I think it's a very valid complaint.
Thank you.
Speaking of points, Max Verstappen is now leading the Drivers' Championship. He has come all the way back from just a few races ago being way behind. He now has 110 points, and in second is Charles Leclerc with 104. Checo is in third with 85 points, and George Russell in a nice, comfortable fourth with 74. Sainz is in fifth with 65, and then Lewis is in sixth with 46. So I will point out that he is falling behind George Russell by an ever-increasing amount.
George Russell, who's in striking distance of the top dogs.
Yeah, certainly. Lando Norris is in seventh with 39 points. I'm sorry, 39 points. Right behind him, Bottas with 38. Esteban Ocon is in ninth with 30. Kevin Magnussen in 10th in the Haas with 15 points. Daniel Ricciardo in 11th with 11. Tsunoda is in 12th with 11. Pierre Gasly is in 13th with 6. Vettel is in 14th with 4. Alonso is in 15th with 4. Alex Albon is in 16th with 3, which is quite impressive in a Williams. That was definitely the slowest car this weekend.
Yeah.
Lance Stroll is in 17th with 2. Zhou Guanyu is in 18th with 1. He got that 1 on his first race of the season and has not gotten any more since.
Mm-hmm.
Mick Schumacher has no points, along with Nico Hülkenberg, and with the special designation of being considered in 21st place in a series with 20 drivers, Nicholas Latifi.
I feel like we should throw in like a very tacky cheering right here. Sound bite. Yay!
I need like a little sampler I can play little sound effects.
Poor guy. Yeah, he's out of here. Maybe not immediately, but he's out of here shortly.
I would love to see De Vries try out that car for the second half of the season.
I don't really get why he has the seat. You know, like
I think it's a paid seat.
What's that mean? He paid his way in?
Yeah.
Literally, he paid for it.
Yep.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's that's a thing in F1. Like Mazepin did that. Stroll is probably considered a paid seat.
Yeah.
He's from a rich family.
I didn't know it was a literal thing.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Imagine you're just like, I'm going to be the quarterback of the New England Patriots. And you just write a check to Robert Kraft.
Yeah. It's a little crazy. Although it's a little bit different from that, maybe, because you can't do that with Mercedes. Because they have enough money. It's just these little teams that don't really have a big enough budget.
Yeah.
I don't watch enough football, but, you could pick a bad football team and be like, I'm going to pay to be the quarterback of that team. Nice. Yeah. But anyway, for the constructors' standings, Red Bull with gobs and gobs of points this weekend is now in the lead of the Constructors' Championship as well with 195 points.
Oh.
In second is Ferrari with 169, and Mercedes is in third with 120.
Oh, wow. Bigger gap than I thought there would be for them. But that makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. They are pretty solidly the third best car, according to the Constructors' Championship, though, because the next car is the McLaren with 50.
Yeah.
And I think that the Alfa and maybe even the Alpine are faster cars than the McLaren.
They just had that one really good race where they got a lot of points.
Yeah. And then also with the Alpine, like Guanyu Zhou has not been contributing.
Or Alpha. Yeah.
Alpha Romeo. Yes, the Alpha. Yeah, the A words.
Yeah.
Bottas has 38 points on his own, which is better than a lot of constructors. So McLaren's in fourth with 50. Alpha is in fifth with 39, which we said 38 was from Bottas. Alpine is in sixth with 34. And then we have AlphaTauri in seventh with 17. Coming into the season, I would have thought that AlphaTauri would be a better team than they seem to be right now.
Yeah, I agree. They looked a little bit quicker, and I think Yuki's better than he was last year, and Pierre's fairly solid. I would agree. I would think they'd have some more points.
Yeah. They're very close with Haas in eighth place, 15 points for them, which are all from Kevin Magnussen.
Mm-hmm.
Aston Martin is in ninth with 6 points. And then Williams is in last place with the 3 points that Alexander Albon has delivered.
Carrying Williams.
Certainly. And that's Spain. That's all I got.
What's
really
next,
entertaining race. What's next is Monaco.
Yeah.
Next week.
On your birthday.
Yeah. Yeah, the day before the race, qualifying day.
What are you doing? Are you going to be around? Are you going to watch it?
I will be around to watch the race. Yes.
Yeah.
In qualifying, I think. So don't worry, Vroomers. Even though it's my birthday, we will still be here for you.
I'm going to be in Virginia. I'm going to be riding bikes in Virginia. Maybe do it on your own, a little birthday solo podcast.
You're going to be out on Sunday too?
I'm definitely going to watch it. The guys I'm riding with will watch it. They love F1. I don't know if I can record though.
Are you riding on Sunday?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Memorial Day weekend, so we're off on Monday.
How long of a ride do you think it'll be?
80 miles. 7,000 feet of climbing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you think about just plopping your headphones in and we can do it while you're on the bike?
I'll bring my GoPro. I think there's a webcam feature on the GoPro.
Yeah.
FaceTime in or something.
That might, if we pulled that off, that could be a first in the Formula One podcasting space.
Most spaces where we'd probably create something.
We could get really, we could get really experimental with our show. So, rumors, we will be back to talk about Monaco soon, but it seems somewhat unclear exactly when.
Until then.
Until then, we'll leave you with this. What did you learn this week, Nick?
I learned so much JavaScript. I learned so much JavaScript.
That's awesome.
And I learned that I'm a fickle man.
Not as fickle as computers are. Computers are very fickle.
Probably true. But I cry more. I'm just kidding. I didn't cry, but I want to. It's going to happen soon. What did you learn this week?
Oh. Ooh. I don't know. I asked you and I didn't know. I learned that Rodger Federer is a Formula One fan.
That the spread operator is the sexiest part of JavaScript.
Yeah, just you wait until you start doing some destructuring and some promises and yeah. All right, well, before this turns into a programming podcast, I think we're going to have to leave you here, Rumors. But everyone stay cool out there, and we'll see you when we see you.
We'll see you in Monaco.